y'all, Dixie here. It's a new year, so it is time for another silly/embarrassing questions video. I think this is the 8th video that I've done of this style where basically I encourage folks in the backpacking community, especially newbies, to ask questions that maybe they were previously too embarrassed or bashful to ask, because oftentimes if you have the question, somebody else does too. If you want to see the other videos like this one, because there have been a lot of questions covered now, like probably 100 of them, then I will link to the playlist that has all of these style videos in the video description of this video. The first question is, how does one dig a cat hole in time to use it when nature is calling super urgently? The simplest answer here is you don't have to dig it beforehand. You can actually do your business, because God, I feel what you're talking about, that rush to, try to get there and get your britches down and do whatever in time before you crap your pants. So anyway, you can actually just go a surface dump, if you will, and then dig the cat hole beside it, scrape it off into the hole, and then do everything else from there. But one follower had an interesting answer to this particular question. He said that he actually digs he and his wife's cat hole the day before. So this would assume two things. One, that you get to camp early enough to go scout out a spot to use the bathroom and pre-dig a cat hole, but two, that you're a very regular morning pooper. One or more of these things may not be true, especially for thru-hikers, but not all backpackers are thru-hikers. So if you are somebody who does get to camp at a regular time and you have a regular time of day for a bowel movement, then this option might work nicely for you. The next question says, I use a Gatorade bottle since it has a larger opening to avoid leaving my tent and bag for my midnight adventure for relief. How common is this? Most people simply get out of tent and brave the cold. Was on the PCT this year and never asked at our communal dinner. It's so true that at dinner, backpackers like to talk about their bowel movements and other bathroom festivities. But anyway, yes, this is super common. Most of the fellas that I have backpacked around talk about their pee bottle. So just for this, they don't have to get out of their tent in the middle of the night, especially when it's cold. I haven't been brave enough to use a pee style and into one of the wide mouth bottles, but I have certainly heard of some ladies who do the same thing. There are some folks who have mentioned they use a very lightweight collapsible portable urinal. And then one follower also said that they'll even use a quart-size freezer bag and go in that, zip it up, and then store it in the vestibule just in case there are any leaks or spills. It doesn't happen in the tent, and that's a really lightweight option. So it really just depends on your personal preference, but this is definitely common amongst the backpacking community. Next up, please explain to me how to use a sleeping bag liner. It seems like you get very tangled up in it. Yes, I definitely know the frustration of a sleeping bag liner, and I ditched mine some time ago. I haven't used one since my AT thru-hike, or maybe the PCT at the very beginning. One of the reasons was to save weight, but another reason, they just are very frustrating to me. So if you're using a sleeping bag liner, then there are really kind of two options that you're using it for. One is for warmth, and the other is maybe for cleanliness. So if it's for extra warmth, then I would just go out on a limb and say you're gonna be way better off if you just get another sleeping bag that has a lower temperature rating so that you stay warm with just the sleeping bag. I know that not everybody wants to go out and shell out the cash to buy a whole new sleeping bag. So if you got what you got and you're just trying to make it work, then maybe invest in a better base layer so that, you're basically wearing the sleeping bag liner, or put on an additional layer. That way you don't find yourself getting so tangled. But on the off chance that you are using it to help keep your sleeping bag cleaner on the inside and less wear and tear, or if you're just adamant, I really want to use a sleeping bag liner, there could be some modifications that maybe you could make to the inside of the sleeping bag and the outside of the liner, like stitching some little ties to the inside of the bag and outside of the liner that you could basically just knot together to help it kind of stay in place. Somebody else mentioned that maybe clothespins could help. And then there was another commenter who said, instead of trying to spin inside the liner that is inside the bag, they spin with the liner inside the bag, and that probably seems like your best option if you don't want to make any modifications. So if anyone else has creative solutions that they have come up with, please feel free to leave that in the comments below. The next question is, does anyone ever actually use those double toilet, no privacy wall trail privies? Like, who wants to sit next to your new trail friend and go number 2? Why are they like that? I've always wondered this too, so I'm really glad that somebody asked so that I would spend some more time kind of trying to figure it out. I posted on Facebook from the Homemade Wanderlust account and asked the question also in the Homemade Wanderlust backpacking forum group just to see if anyone had an actual answer for this. And one person mentioned that maybe it's for like capacity purposes. Basically, you have 2 holes in one structure. So basically you're maximizing that space taken, the materials that it took to build that structure, and you're not having 2 separate privies with like twice the wood or whatever materials are used, and you've got the capacity of 2 holes. Now, somebody said, well, I always thought the second one was for when the first one filled up, but I've never actually seen like one blocked off, like don't use this one, use this one instead. But I mean, that kind of tracks that it would be for capacity. That makes sense to me. Someone else suggested that maybe it's to cover laws for those certain areas. Like, I've heard of certain areas where all restrooms must be handicap accessible. Like, even if it's the most treacherous trail coming up, you know, it has to be wheelchair accessible by law. So maybe it's something to do with that. Like, you have to have 2 commodes if you are gonna have a bathroom or something, you know, I don't know. And then there was a commenter who said that they were glad they didn't have to wait in line. And although it was super awkward, they did sit down and, you know, use the toilet next to somebody. So maybe people actually use it for that purpose. I don't know. So if anybody knows like the actual answer, then I would love to hear that in the comments below. I'm hoping that maybe some trail maintainer can chime in here. Next up, if I want to backpack domestically or internationally, but have to bring my own freeze-dried food for health reasons, can I put them in a carry-on, I assume on an airplane? Will they pass customs? Should I just mail them? Any help is appreciated. So I can't really speak for all international flights because I would assume that some of that might be dependent upon what country you're flying into. But as far as flights here in the US, domestic flights, you can go with food. I have gone with prepackaged backpacking freeze-dried food before. Now, it was like by Mountain House or, you know, some brand. It wasn't something I made myself. But if you look on TSA's website, they have very specifically all sorts of different types of food. And even if the food is open, from what I could find on their website, it's fine. The only real restrictions and limitations for carry-on are if it's like a gel or liquid type substance, and then usually it's okay. You're just limited to like 3 ounces or less. Now for checked bags, it doesn't seem like there really is much of a limitation. So anyway, if you want to find specifically what you will be bringing, then I'm gonna link to TSA's website where it talks about different foods in the video description. As far as the international flights, I would just check with the airlines that you're gonna take for more information on that. When you get to a camp area near trail with a tent, do you set up with the door facing the trail or facing away? I'm nervous to have the tent door facing away because I could get snuck up on, but I'm also nervous to set up facing the trail because of changing and feeling exposed. Like, get out of my head because I have thought this exact thing before. But the truth is, it really doesn't matter how you set up. If somebody wants to sneak up on you, then even if your vestibule is facing the trail, then before they walk down the trail, they could just get off trail and sneak up on the backside of your tent. Anyway, not to freak you out, but I'm just saying if somebody wants to like get you, then they can find a way to do it regardless of how your tent is oriented. And it's not like your tent is, you know, a super secured Fort Knox. I think that there are better things that you could do to prevent somebody from like sneaking up or to make it more noticeable that somebody's approaching. Maybe we should say that so that we're not freaking ourselves out. But like setting up way off trail to where your tent is not super visible, or setting up where there are like leaves or a bunch of twigs around so you can actually hear. I mean, it's pretty noisy if something or somebody is stepping on twigs and leaves. And as far as changing, as long as you close your vestibule, then, you know, somebody shouldn't be able to see you anyway. And I mean, I don't know, once you're out there for a while, your ears just get kind of tuned into what's going on. So I feel like most of the time you hear folks approaching anyway, so you could close it real quick if you just really want to leave it open. But the way that I orient my tent, I have a double vestibule, so I've got one on either side. So normally I'll face one near the trail and one away from it. And then if I feel like being sociable, then I'll leave the vestibule open on the trail side. If I'm not really feeling sociable, then I'll leave that one closed and open up the other one. Or based on the view, if I can get a beautiful sunrise or a beautiful sunset, then I might be more likely to open my doors in those directions. Anyway, I hope that helps. Since you have experience with the SOS button, what happens if you come upon a person that is experiencing an emergency and needs help? Do you press the button or not? Who is responsible for any cost to save another person's life? Well, I would hope that if I'm dying, that somebody will push the button regardless, right? But I do understand the dilemma here. Like, you don't want to be stuck with 60 grand doing a good deed and no good deed goes unpunished. And, you know, you're stuck with that because somebody didn't take responsibility for it or they died. So anyway, from what I was able to gather online, poking around, as long as you don't falsely call, right? Like, you know, kids pranking calling 911, like as long as it's not a false alarm and you called for not an emergency, I don't know why anyone would do that, but then the person who search and rescue come to rescue, it is their financial responsibility to pay whatever costs are accrued with getting them out of the wilderness. And if you look on Garmin's website, they specifically state this, that if you have an Inreach or Garmin device and you push the SOS button, then the person that is saved, rescued, is the one responsible for the costs. So if I see somebody who needs help, I'm gonna push the button. Do you ever get where you can judge how far you've walked? Example, 1 mile, 5 miles. I can never tell how far I've gone. There was a time where I definitely was not good at this, and it kind of feels like every time I get back out on a trail after it's been a little while, I have to get like reacclimated. But the answer is yes. I do finally get to a point where I can figure this out. And there are several ways. One, looking at the Far Out app or the All Trails app and like having the ability to see where I'm at on trail and to like track myself and see how quickly, you know, I'm able to cover that distance. Or even if you have like a normal trail map or like you're on a trail that you know the distance, or a stretch of trail between two different landmarks where it's a known distance, especially something short like a mile. And then you can look like, okay, it took me about 30 minutes to walk a mile. So I know in an hour, I'm gonna do 2 miles. So my pace is 2 miles per hour. So kind of learning your pace, then you can estimate based on the time about how far you've gone. Now, of course, this will vary based on terrain, more difficult terrain. You might have a slower pace. For me, my uphill pace is a lot slower than my downhill pace. So anyway, it is something that can take a little time, but hopefully those are some pointers to help you watch and figure that out. When one has to leave the trail to relieve themselves, how do you find your way back to the trail, especially when the trail is not well maintained or traveled much? Thanks in advance. So I always use my phone as my main source of navigation with either the All Trails app or the Far Out app, so I can actually see in airplane mode through GPS where I'm located and where the trail is at. And I have actually had to use that before when I was kind of disoriented after going to the bathroom to get back to the trail. And I know folks are like, really? I mean, how far are you going off trail? Well, far enough that I don't want folks to see me doo-dooing, right? Nobody wants to see a hiker with a tail. So I try to, you know, look at exactly where I went and all that, but you can get turned around. It can definitely happen. So I like to have my form of navigation with me, even if I leave my pack by the trail. But whatever form of navigation you use, I would make sure you have that with you. I just like being able to look at my phone, see my location, see the location of the trail, see which way I need to orient myself and get back to the trail. Well, those are all the embarrassing questions I have for you this time. I do want to let you know, if you didn't see it before, if the algorithm did not serve it up to you, my West Highland Way documentary that I recorded in Scotland, because that's where the West Highland Way is now available. It is called Baby Steps. I will link to it in the video description in case you missed it. I think you would enjoy it. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to share this video with a friend if you found it helpful, and we will see y'all next time.